In the south and west, lowest temperatures of 9 to 12 degrees. And now you're up to date on News Talk.
The Football Show on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power's Save Our Game. Donating at least 100,000 to Irish football via England goals this summer. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
I'm prepared to do anything I can to play for my country again.
Do it then. What about your start to the game?
It wasn't bad, was it?
Why should an honest answer be a mistake?
How can a modern day manager not have a mobile phone?
Why should he?
Oh.
Well, busy football show. Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent, hello.
Hi, Joe.
Later on we'll have Philip O'Connor, who is a journalist in Scandinavia. He will give us the insight from a quietly confident Danish camp. Dan, we are 0-0 with the second half underway at Wembley on this Tuesday evening. My favourite moment of the day thus far, when a journalist asked Kasper Schmeichel how would he feel if they managed, the Danes that is, to stop football from coming home. These were the words the journalist used, to which Kasper Schmeichel said, has football ever come home? And the journalist said, well, 1966. And Schmeichel said, but you've never won this tournament. Which prompted then the journalist to do more thinking about the exact meaning of the Frank Skinner, David Baddiel lyrics than the journalist wanted to do. Would they tournament the World Cup or just any major tournament? Would the Nations League count as football coming home? And at that stage, Kasper Schmeichel moved on, and it was a memorable moment. I liked it in the press conference. How are you doing?
Kasper had won that round, to be fair. I think that's one of the. It looked like it was a Zoom question as well, which makes it much harder to have the traditional back and forth that you might have. But at least you don't have other people in the room laughing at you at the time while you ask the stupid question, if you know what I mean. But Kasper Schmeichel did grow up, with the Euros trophy, probably, in the house or something at some stage with 1992 and all of that.
Yes. Certainly prompted, I would think, a quick gathering outside of the English journalists to decide what exactly does football coming home mean here. What are we?
Well, what does it? I mean, yeah. What does it all mean? This is when you start to analyse that. That's surely the follow up next week at some stage. But what does that even mean?
Because the song was for Euro '96, and they were talking about 30 years of pain. So presumably they count football coming home as either the World Cup or the European Championships. Although Kasper was going with a more definitive definition and more specific.
And will they abandon the song if they win the Euros, because football is them come home? So you have to reset the years of hurt back to zero. 1.5 years of hurt to Qatar next year.
That song would be updated and released on the Christmas #1 is a chilling but very real thought, I would think, if England win Euro 2020.
These are all the subplots we have to deal with in the next period of time, Joe. As it becomes feasible, this might happen.
I presume you've watched that first half at Wembley?
I have, yeah. It's been enjoyable. I'm not sure how much you've spoken about it on the show thus far, but it's sort of it's building up. It's like a chess match, but like a really fast-paced chess match. If you know what I mean. Like, it's sort of quite entertaining, but there's not exactly, like you say, a huge amount of clear-cut chances, and there's sort of a clash of styles to some degree. And that Spain are keeping a lot of the ball, but not necessarily unlocking Italy that much, although they did have one particularly good chance, which Almo missed. Whereas Italy have sort of gone for a different approach, a bit more direct, and have had some joy actually with just balls over a few balls, sort of not just balls over the top, but sort of intelligent enough clips over the top to try and stretch Spain when they're sort of pressed up a bit. And they've had their moments, but it's been enjoyable without necessarily a show reel of goal scoring opportunities.
Yeah.
But a high level game, definitely.
Spain with 61% possession is the official stat from that first half. And probably the better chances, as you said, they had that really good chance on 25 minutes where Donnarumma makes a great save from Dani Olmo. Olmo had that shot from, I'd say, maybe 12, 13 yards out tops, and Donnarumma got down very well to save. So on 25 minutes, that was their biggest chance. Pedri, who's been really good. I mean, you think of great players on the journey to becoming great, making their mark in big games. I think this game might be remembered as another moment for Pedri. So he's been really good. He put Oyarzabal through, who just had a very bad touch in 12 minutes with his left foot. If the touch had even been average, Oyarzabal would have probably scored that chance. That was on 12 minutes. I mean, it was such a clear-cut chance that I think we assumed he was offside, and only on the replay saw that actually you were in, and all it needed was a half-decent touch and a shot, and you were 1-0 up after 12 minutes. Torres had a shot just wide after a loose ball from Barella. And then maybe the Italians' big chance was when Unai Simon rushed from his goal and missed the race with Emerson, and then Immobile was trying to get a shot away and cut inside a man, and then Busquets came to the rescue. That was maybe Spain's most alarming moment, when Unai Simon rushed off his line and missed the ball.
Yeah, and listen, to be fair, like Simon a couple of times has actually played the sweeper role quite well, in terms of, cutting off a couple of other chances at the pass, but he got his judgment right. And yeah, it was one of those where he was out of his goal, but Italy just couldn't get the ball out of their feet quick enough to expose it. But it's good, it's funny. I haven't been madly convinced by Spain in the competition, but at the same time, you put them into like a really good game here, and their ability to keep the ball so well naturally gives them a great platform in the match. Busquets has been very good, and then they sprung the surprise by dropping Morata and going with the false nine, and it's allowed them to sort of give them sort of an extra body in midfield to, overrun Italy at times. But then you could flip the debate around and say, there's an Italian, the experienced Italian defenders have generally managed to keep the game ahead of them, with the exception of like a couple of shots from outside the box, as you mentioned, and that one good chance they did give up. But I have to say, like, it's set up for a long night, this one, the way it's going. But we'll see. We still got 40 minutes to go to stop that from happening. Yeah.
You wonder if Morata's kicking his heels thinking, I would take one of these chances. But as you said, the false nine plan is working out well. They have an extra man in midfield. It's the first time I've really seen that Italian three of Verratti and Barella and Jorginho. Chance for Spain. Busquets moved down the right hand side, ball cut to Busquets, edge of the area, and just a touch high, but it was a shot with a bit of pace on it. But it's the first time I've seen in this tournament, really, Verratti and Barella and Jorginho shut down. So often Spain doing a really hard-working man-marking job on those three when the Italians are trying to play out.
No, they are, and like there's actually a sort of a theory, like, should the Italians maybe look at a change at some stage and look at someone like Locatelli or someone who's a bit more physical in there, just to try and, I don't know, upset the Spanish rhythm in some way. But obviously, that can go both ways. But I mean, Spain have started the second half really well, but as they sort of, as they've stepped on at times, like, Italy have found space in behind and are like one or two passes away. We're just watching them on a break at the moment here, and getting a shot away too. So there's a few angles to it. Like the Morata one is interesting because, listen, I can't imagine like, Luis Enrique concocted a plan where he thought Morata wouldn't have a big role to play in the tie, in the game as such. And it's just a matter of like, if you have this Spanish team running round and sort of causing a few problems to what is like certainly an experienced sort of enough Italian defence, then maybe you send Morata into the game a bit later on, when all of a sudden then he gives them something different to think about, and it actually, that's actually a brilliant plan B to have on the bench. And you sort of wonder at what stage do we see him if the pattern of the game continues. It could be a sort of a 65, 70-minute job that he suddenly comes in and may still have a really big role to play in the game.
Yeah, very much so. Chiesa with that shot, by the way, that Dan mentioned, the Italian breakaway, was dangerous. It was threatening. You're getting a sense now maybe a goal is coming. And we have seen a trend at this tournament of second halves really opening up. Pat Nevin was talking about that yesterday, becoming very ragged as the games go on, and it's made the tournament very enjoyable and unpredictable as well, I think. I did want to ask you, so forget about the Copa America being overshadowed. Domestically, League of Ireland football overshadowed by the Euros and squeezed, and I'm sure you're finding that even in the paper, trying to get the coverage of the domestic game in. What's been going on? Where are we? I know you're covering a big Shamrock Rovers game tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a strange one. Like, it's a really weird time of the year, this. So I remember this being very similar back in 2016, when Dundalk actually started like their most famous European campaign, like the one that changed Irish football in terms of Stephen Kenny and all of that, in the shadow of the Euros, with their, their first game against the team from Iceland wasn't on TV. It was completely sort of overshadowed by everything that was going on. At the best of times, the League of Ireland can be overshadowed, but your Champions League and European games are generally, where people tune in, but not necessarily when it overlaps with the end of the Euros. So you have a situation where Shamrock Rovers are playing tomorrow, against Slovan Bratislava, and now it's 5:30 Irish time. But like, it's a really like significant, really big game for Shamrock Rovers, and yet it's obviously, England are playing a couple of hours later, and most of the football world is obviously watching that. It's a weird one tonight, the Champions League qualifiers. Remember, like Finland a couple of weeks back, and Daniel O'Shaughnessy, our mate from, the Daniel O'Shaughnessy with the Galway dad, was playing for Finland in the Euros 2 weeks ago, and tonight is playing a Champions League qualifier for HJK Helsinki in the 2021-22 season. You just get on with it. Shamrock Rovers tomorrow, Vladimir Weiss is the Slovan. He was with the Slovakia squad at the Euros, and the football cycle goes on 12 months a year. And these really significant games for Irish clubs with like huge amounts of money at stake, take place sometimes under a real shadow. And the irony is that the league season has been sort of really open this year. It's been quite exciting. Maybe exciting is not the right word, because I'm not sure about, like, until last weekend there was 3 teams level on points. Shamrock Rovers, St Pat's, and Sligo Rovers, and Dundalk not in the discussion, and that's a big plot change from recent years. But we're obviously not sure if that's to do with the level going up or actually a bit of a mediocre year and everything sort of flattening out. And these European games might give us a bit of a handle on that. But listen, it's the same old story. Like, you see the FAI accounts come out last week, and it sort of illustrates how Irish football generally, cash is tight. There's a big debate going on at the moment about state support and, maybe getting behind League of Ireland academies and how we need to invest in that and how important that is. And Micheál Martin was on your show a couple of weeks back, or, whenever that was, discussing that topic. But until that happens, the best route for our clubs to make money is these European games every year, and hope that the draw falls your way and you can somehow get a bit of luck or a bit of quality, or things go your way in a 2-legged tie that can suddenly give you an influx of cash that you basically can't get from any other route if you're involved in football in this country.
And what are Rovers' chances?
Yeah, so Slovan Bratislava Rovers are unseeded. This is the thing. Like, Dundalk would have been seeded because of their pedigree in recent years, been in group stage football twice. But Shamrock Rovers, this is their first time in the Champions League since 2012. And they met AC Milan last year, which was great for them glamour-wise in the Europa League, but it cut short their chances of getting the progress they needed to be seeded in this first round. So they're like Slovan Bratislava, to give a form guide. They played Dundalk in 2019, beat them 4-1 in aggregate in a tie that could have been a bit closer, to be fair. But they are like a quality team with a lot of Brazilian players in their ranks, actually, but overseas players and some good Slovakian internationals. But in saying that, like, I think the Shamrock Rovers team, the way they play, is quite equipped to doing well in Europe. They keep the ball well. They play that way domestically. So when they transition to play in Europe, it's not a massive, culture shock that they have to try and pass the ball through the thirds and midfield and keep the ball. So it's an interesting one. There's a lot of changes in Europe this year. Like, the away goals rule is gone, which would normally be a big talking point for, this is the first test of it now. And normally, like, the whole language about these ties would be, Shamrock Rovers are away tomorrow, and if they lost 2-1, you'd be thinking, great result. They've got the away goal, 1-0 next week does it. Whereas now it's like, it's not really like that. It's just at a 180-minute tie, and who scores the most goals. And like, you would think in some ways it's maybe weighted against the underdogs in a strange way, because that away goal might give them hope if they were well beaten, and that in some respects. So there's a few elements to it. There's a third competition in European football this year. It's not just the Champions League and the Europa League. There's a new Europa Conference League, which is where the other 3 Irish clubs will start off on Thursday. And that's a bit of a different thing now as well. And basically for Shamrock Rovers this year, the whole key to the whole thing is that first round tie. Because if you win a Champions League game, as we watch a goal, which we should talk about the goal, because Italy have scored,
Chiesa.
And it's a terrific goal. Yeah, we'll get back to that. We'll get back to what we were talking about. That's some strike. And again, it was on a bit of a counter, wasn't it? Like, it looked like a bit of Spanish pressure.
Yeah.
And Italy just, moved it quickly to the other end. And I think I saw a Leitrim jersey in the celebrations there, or some GA jersey of some description.
I feel like,
which I'm sure should be viral. We'll be watching at some stage in the morning. I'm not sure what county jersey that was, but what a goal though.
Whenever an Italian scores a goal like that, I want them to celebrate like Tardelli, and Chiesa didn't quite do that. I want the hands. I want that. So it's from move down the Spanish left-hand side, and keeper takes it and rolls it out to the left-hand side. And I presume I'm getting an overhead replay. It must be Insigne, I would think, just based on his positioning, who plays the ball forward. And there's a tackle and it's intercepted, but Chiesa pounces on it, takes 3 touches, cuts back onto his right-hand foot from the left-hand side, and does the old curl into the far corner. Beautiful finish. Not much the keeper can do, and that's a goal fit to win this game if it proves to do so. So that's the hour mark now. That's a sucker punch for Spain, who've had so much of the ball and had quite a lot of pressure and had a chance or two, and then the Italians break up the pitch, as you say, Dan. And they were threatening to do it. We mentioned it just a few minutes back. Chiesa had a shot then as well. This one of superior quality this time around, and we're seeing shots of Mancini celebrating, as you might imagine, and Chiesa grabbing his crest and grabbing his jersey and sprinting away.
Yeah, he loves Wembley, that boy. He scored there against Austria in the round of 16, and he's made it happen again here. But yeah, some strike. Just actually, as you mentioned, like a real Donnarumma. By the way, who started his season back in Tala Stadium in a Europa League tie back in September. It's funny how the worlds overlap. Donnarumma just takes the ball and even he spotted the situation really quickly. That even when he released the pass, he was like outside the box, outside his box, sort of, spotting the opportunity. And clearly, it's something they would have spoken about, that you can see how they've attacked in this game, that Spain can be vulnerable when they're attacking. And that's what Italy have exposed a couple of times.
Yeah. So there we go, it's official. 60th minute, Chiesa with the goal for Italy. They are 1-0 up against Spain at Wembley at the Euro 2020 semi-final stages. And you would think now this game is going to be slowed right down. Expect some fouls, expect a lot of players to have injuries, I would think. This will become a stop-start affair very, very quickly. Very quickly,
yeah. It'll be... and Morata is on straight away for Ferran Torres as well. So no surprise. Spain are going to have even more time around the box now, you would think. So... sort of logical to get Morata in there.
Before the clock comes against us, just to pick up on the domestic point, you mentioned the finances as well, and I'll come back to your point about the extra new tournament this year, but from memory, doing the pay-per-view, so don't quote me exactly, but in the Sunday Times I was reading a piece, and in short, a few things which stick in the memory certainly is that we're still handing over about $100,000 a month to Sports Direct, and that is going to be the case for some time to come, and the FAI are trying to see if they can pay that loan ahead of schedule because the interest is very, very considerable. So that horrible situation continues. The other point which I seem to remember in effect is that the FAI is €65 million in debt, but that the situation is, quote, more stable. Sport Ireland has reintroduced its funding on the back of reforms made, and also the CEO's salary will drop from, well, very close to $1 million per annum in 2017 to, I think now, 207,000. So there, that's a huge saving of guts of 800 grand per year.
Yeah, no, listen, I mean, yeah, like you read the accounts and you read the notes in the accounts, and listen, the bottom line point is that they're still reliant on third party sources of income or protection, in terms of like their banking partners or, money from sort of UEFA. There was a FIFA loan to do with the pandemic. I mean, listen, there's no doubt that the FAI have been the authors of their own downfall, but when they did do a sort of a restructuring deal, which gave them a better chance to live, the fact that COVID came along straight away was particularly unfortunate. I mean, their match income revenue in 2019 was £8 million, and that came down in 2020 to something like, I think, 300 grand. Now they did get the access to COVID relief fund and certain sort of emergency sources of income, which sort of offset the damage of that, and even led them to return a surplus for the year, bizarrely enough. But the reality is there's a lack of certainty going forward, and with stadiums opening up, maybe at restricted capacities, as might be our future, you have matches back, so you're not necessarily maybe subject to the same relief support you might have got, but you don't get to maximise the income of a full stadium. So the bottom line is, it was pointed out very clearly that there's still material concern about the future of the FAI, going forward. But things look to be better. They've restructured the deal with Bank of Ireland, which took away a lot of the sort of monies fallen due within 1 year. And they clearly have a better relationship with government, which is a reason for some optimism going forward. But the reality is still, the FAI is sort of reliant on variable things. Qualification for tournaments and stuff does become important because they're pretty tight otherwise, and there's only so much they can ask for in terms of support.
€65 million debt is €65 million debt at the end of the day. So Spain have just had a gilt-edged chance, and it's Urathobal again who had that bad touch in the first half. Brilliant ball by Koke. He's just outside the area, and the Italian defensive line is pretty much set, but Urathobal makes a little run in behind, and it's just a clip ball over the top. And I mean, you would say normally in an instance like this, the ball was too high, or it was just behind him, or just ahead of him. I couldn't see after one replay, Dan, any reason why he couldn't get his head on that.
Oh, it was perfect. It was an absolutely perfect cross. And, if Italy go on to win this game, we'll talk about Italian efficient defending, seeing it out, but they were done on this instance. And actually, another ball into the box there has really caused them problems too.
Yeah, Olmo with the shot just wide after Urathobal knocked it down.
But no, listen, you're right. Like, sometimes it's behind someone or too far ahead of them, but it was almost like the cross was so perfect, he just switched off for a second. And I don't know, unless he was anticipating that the ball wouldn't make it to him or something. But it's very hard to explain it. It just really looked like he froze.
He seemed to run at it appropriately with his body, but pulled his neck in like a turtle, frankly. Yeah,
didn't stick the head out when it's happened to the best of us, just not in the European Championship semi-final in front of something similar happened to an Astro recently. It doesn't really apply to the same degree of standards.
No, less discussed on OTB that night, I remember.
Definitely, yeah.
Speaking of debt, by the way, you just put through the Barcelona story. Again, this is one of these stories that has passed people by, and I was just saying to Will, even on the news round, who brought it to us, that I'm just sceptical of all these stories because we'll see headlines of doomsday, and we've seen headlines of doomsday at Barcelona for a long time, and then I just sort of presume that creative accounting will kick in at the last minute and the cliff edge will be pushed further down the line. How serious now is the situation at Barcelona getting?
Yeah, listen, I see where you're coming from in that, and ultimately, the reality is that, like, part of Barcelona's plight being what it is, like, they were still top of, like, the Deloitte money list last year, I think, for being like one of the richest clubs in the world, but that's based on sort of what their assets are worth and so on and so forth, and a lot of other things, and projected revenues. And the pandemic has hit them pretty badly. But this is the whole, like, football worldwide is sick, right? Like, I mean, clubs run massive losses all the time, run up massive and operate with massive trading losses. But because they generate so much money, it's not going to be their debts aren't necessarily going to be called in. But Barcelona, maybe because of the pandemic, it feels like it's heightened their situation in such a way that all of a sudden the La Liga rules around income and their wage bill, they actually now need to get people off the wage bill in the short term, very simple, because they can't register. Like, I mean, the fact that they've basically made free transfer signings this summer, like Aguero, and there's a few others coming in, Memphis, and they can't technically renew Lionel Messi's contract because they need to get bodies off the wage bill. That's why they sold a player to Leeds earlier. I think you mentioned that in the news round. And they need to get a couple more out the door to balance the books. Now, when they balance the books, of course, they'll be generating massive money through, like, income and again, like, their Champions League participation and all of that. But it is a bit of a short-term crisis, and it is going to curtail their spending in the short term. And we've seen that they've had a bit of a regression in recent years. There was the issue with the players not getting paid in January for a period of time. So clearly, their cash flow situation is really, really problematic, and it's serious. They'll get out of it. Of course they will. Yeah. But it's going to hit them in the short term in terms of their spending power, for sure.
Interesting. Italy had a big chance, by the way. It was from an angle, admittedly. I think it was Berardi who's come on now as a substitute, and it was at the feet of Unai Simon and saved, but it was a very decent chance. 70 minutes in the clock. Italy won, Spain nil. Dan, I'm seeing lots of kids in the Tala area with Richie Towell haircuts. So he's back. Yeah. Still as fit looking as ever. Incredibly dedicated player. Started taking his career very, very seriously around Dundalk time, and I don't think he takes a day off from training in various accounts I've read. And so he's back at Shamrock Rovers, and he's been doing various interviews. He's had a few interesting things to say, I think. Yeah,
like Richie's still 29, but he was always coming home early. Like, you never bought a house in England. There was always a means to an end in some respects. And from speaking to some people who know Richie quite well, like his ambition going to England was to try and, obviously, make good money, get into the Ireland squad and play at the top level. And didn't quite happen for him in terms of getting the Ireland call, although he's not giving up on it with Stephen Kenny there. But like played at a very good level over there, like played championship with Rotherham. Had a good deal at Brighton and then went down to Salford. Obviously took a very good deal at Salford and very interesting working at that club. And he spoke a bit about that yesterday. Now, listen, Salford didn't get promoted from League Two this year, but by his own admission, they probably had a wage bill that was higher than the team, at the top of League One. He actually spoke about, listen, some nice people at the club, and Gary Neville was on call all the time for the players, really helpful if they ever needed anything. He was on the other end of the phone, even how busy he was. But basically spoke about how, for all of that, they didn't necessarily have like a great togetherness or unity about them. And it painted a very different image of like football in England. He actually said he reckoned Shamrock Rovers could probably take Salford, even though Salford would have a much more expensively assembled squad because they were all individuals. He never did anything with his Salford teammates outside of training. Never hung out. People were travelling hours to training, and it just goes to show how they're obviously putting big bucks into getting up the ranks, but they're obviously doing something. They're missing something. You can't just buy your way automatically all the way up the ladder. But yeah, I've said Roy Keane was down there watching them most weeks when he wasn't able to get to Premier League football, I think, during the pandemic. So there's some interesting life stories being around Salford, I'd say.
I guess it's the nature of that beast, isn't it? And I'm not talking about Rich Towell here, but there will be some players there who could be playing at a higher level but are taking the money, and that just breeds a certain atmosphere, and team spirit, I don't think, is one of them. No, and I find it hard to condemn players who will be chucked out, like they'll be sort of discarded by clubs the minute they get an injury, and I can't really blame someone for dropping down a level if Salford are offering you like a 3-year deal and some really, really good money. Like it's easy for you to say it, particularly if the option is sort of, you're not turning down Premier League football to go there. If you're going to be a sort of a Championship League 1, League 2 player and Salford are offering you better money, I mean, it's easy to say you shouldn't do it. Well, no, sorry, I never said that.
Oh, I know that.
I'd be there in a heartbeat. I'd be there in a heartbeat, Dan. But I can see how it creates. I can see how it creates a certain type of atmosphere of this. I'm very much CEO of my own corporation here, and I'm just here to, not just here to make money, but it would attract certain types who would be, I guess, Mayfainers, for want of a better word. Oh, look,
100%. And like you see, say, what Dundalk did in 2016 when they had an amazingly unified group, and you look at sort of the League One this year, and like Peterborough went up, I think, and teams who wouldn't be sort of full of cash, but they clearly had a real bond, that carries them a long way. Listen, you see it in this tournament here, and it's really this Italian bond looks to be quite something, and at that level you don't have any choice, and that's the part of the attraction of international football, that money only comes into it in the state, your country's infrastructure, but beyond that you have to deal with the hand you're given. But clearly, we talk about the Barcelona situation, we talk about losses and the mad money being thrown around football. It doesn't always sort of get you everything you want. No. And it's really interesting. If you talk to Irish lads who've been around the lower leagues in England, I find they've got great insights on the game and the business and how it works and how it's dog eat dog. Everyone's contracts are, very short term most of the time. And it's a sort of precarious existence. So of course people end up looking after number one and doing what they have to do, but it doesn't always make for, building a very successful team. No. Those tales of lower league over in England, industry in the worst sense of the word, I mean, it is a brutal world. Dan, we are out of time. I'll let you go and enjoy the last 15 minutes of this game. Thank you, Joe. Cheers. I will talk to you. Dan McDonnell of the Irish Independent there. We're going to take a short break. Still Italy 1, Spain 0, by the way. 15 minutes to go in this game. We're going to hear from Philip O'Connor next, who'll give us an insight into the Danish camp ahead of their semi-final tomorrow.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power's Save Our Game. Donating at least 100,000 to Irish football via England goals this summer. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
On the latest Tech Talk, we'll hear about the reality of broadband in rural Ireland. Sue Murphy will explain the exclusive portal on Disney Plus that will showcase Black Widow, and a restaurateur will explain his tech solution to streamline the stock management process.
Tech Talk with Jess Kelly.
Thanks to Think. Visit thinkpm.ie.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast now at newstalk.com or on the Newstalk app, powered by Go Loud.
Guaranteed Irish has been around for almost 50 years and has always been about doing the right thing. Today, business members work hard to support jobs, keep our communities alive and help the Irish economy recover. Guaranteed Irish supports 1,500 businesses, from Indigenous SMEs to locally based multinationals, across various sectors, employing over 100,000 people across Ireland. So, look out for the G and know you're playing your part in Ireland's recovery. GuaranteedIrish.ie. Altogether better.
We've all heard about setting aside money for a rainy day, but what about doing the same for a sunny one? With 0% commission on foreign currency, the On Post Money currency card is your ticket to sorting your spending money for that next big trip away. It's powered by MasterCard and available in post offices nationwide. So visit your local post office or search On Post Money currency card for more. On Post Money, for your world. Terms and conditions apply. On Post Money currency card is issued by PPS EUSA pursuant to licence by MasterCard International. PPS EUSA is authorised by the National Bank of Belgium and is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland for conduct of business rules.
Baby Alex's parents were worried.
We knew that something wasn't quite right. Milestones that he wasn't hitting.
A call was made.
VHI Paediatric Clinic. It was exactly what we needed when we needed it. They were fantastic.
The VHI consultant recommended immediate physio and speech therapy and arranged the next step in his treatment.
Met with the neurologist, got a diagnosis, cerebral palsy.
Now the path ahead looks clearer.
VHI gave us the support and the right level of care. Whatever he wants to do, it isn't going to hold Alex back.
This is Christine.
And I'm glad I'm with VHI Healthcare.
The featured customer has received gratuity for their time in making this commercial. Plan benefit limits, waiting periods, terms and conditions apply. VHI Healthcare DAC trading as VHI Healthcare is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland and is tied to VHI Insurance Stack for health insurance in Ireland.
What do you look for in a day trip? Is it long, sandy beaches and rugged coastlines? Is it ancient castles and majestic gardens? Or is it picturesque towns and villages? Fingal has all this and more, right on Dublin's doorstep, but with the breathing room of the countryside. From Malahide to Howth, Portmarnock to Skerries and Castleknock to Swords, there's a world of adventure waiting to be explored. Plan your trip now at fingal.ie/visitor.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power's Save Our Game. England's goals total 80k so far for Irish football. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Now welcome back. 78 minutes on the clock. Italy 1, Spain 0. We have talked about England plenty on the show, I'm sure you'll agree, but what about the Danish camp ahead of the game tomorrow? Philip O'Connor is a journalist who's followed the Danes for many years for the Reuters news agency. He was in the stadium in Copenhagen on June 12th when Christian Eriksen collapsed, and he joins us now. Philip, how you doing?
I'm great, Joe. How are you?
Yeah, good. Feels like a long time ago, since Sunday 13th of June when we spoke to you, and I think many other media organisations spoke to you after Christian Eriksen had collapsed.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'm actually getting shivers down my spine thinking back to that conversation that we had then. And in one way, it feels like it was a lifetime ago, and yet it feels just like yesterday. I can still see the whole thing as I was describing it to you. I can still see everything sort of, right in front of my eyes. So it'll be a long time before I forget that one. But luckily, since then, an awful lot more positive things have happened to the Danish side, and maybe we might get another one of them at Wembley this week.
They sure have. So, Philip, have you been ensconced with the team or following virtually, or a little bit of both? They've obviously been moving around.
Yeah, so I was in Denmark for the 3 group games, and then I didn't travel to Baku or that kind of thing because it was just going to be far too difficult. But we've had fairly close contact. They're really good, I mean, I have to say, the Danes have always been very, very open to the media. So, all the media conferences, the news conferences, their press officer is very, very helpful. And then there's people around the team. I was just before I started talking to you there, I was talking to Åge Hareide, who was the coach prior to Kasper Hjulmand, and he would have coached against Ireland a number of occasions when we met them sort of 500 times in the last 5 years. So, you know, and he's a guy, I'll give you my number, give me a call if you need to know anything. So I had a little chat with him there about the tactics for tomorrow night, what he would do, what he expects Casper to do. So it's actually really easy to cover them remotely, but I'd love to be actually sort of, you know, with the team at the moment, because I'd say there's an incredible atmosphere in London at the moment.
Wow, interesting to hear that relationship with the media. It varies from country to country. Would the media be tough on the team, be very critical of the team, or fairly fair by the standards of most media with their football teams?
I think they're quite fair, Joe. Scandinavia is interesting because even though the countries are very, very similar, you know, they have this sort of social democratic thing in the post-war period where politically they'd be very similar, welfare states and that. But the Danes would be very upfront. Swedes would like to avoid conflict, but the Danes don't go in for that at all. If they think you're an idiot or you've said something dumb, they're going to tell you, and they probably won't let you forget it. So the atmosphere I found with the national team is that it is very upfront. And if a player doesn't like something you've said or you've written, he'll tell you about it. Now, he's not going to stop talking to you. He's not going to say, oh, I can't believe you did that, you know. But he'll say, look, man, I don't think you were fair to me. When you gave me, you know, 6 out of 10 and I was man of the match or whatever, or if you said this or that, or maybe you don't know the full story, you know. So interestingly, when you go to the Marine Leased Hotel, I don't know if the Irish team still stays in Malahide or the airport hotel, but they have a similar setup down there. So the Marine Leased is out in Helsingør, where Hamlet is set. And usually in non-COVID times, you go out there to a press event and the coach will address the members of the press, and then you get to talk to the players afterwards. And they literally just sit around the hotel lobby or the bar there. So I've been out there interviewing Niklas Bentner, Daniel Agger when he's back playing for Liverpool, Christian Eriksen on a half dozen occasions. You know, Christian's a very quiet fella, very seldom says anything quote-worthy, but he's still there and he'll still talk to you about the club, or he'll still talk to you about the Danish setup. And it's a really, really good way. I found it was actually more worthwhile to go down to Copenhagen to cover a game than to, you know, go 10 minutes from my house here to the Friends Arena when Zlatan was playing, because Zlatan would never talk to you at all, you know. So it's an interesting way. And I do think that they get a very fair run from the public. And the general public actually loves the fact that the media gets that close to them, because at the end of the day, it's about putting these guys before the fans and telling their stories and letting the fans know what it is they're thinking ahead of big games like this one against England.
Wow, that sounds like an unbelievably healthy situation.
It's incredible. And I mean, you know, I actually wrote a piece there a couple of years ago. I worked with the Norwegian women's national team at the Women's World Cup, and they have a very similar policy. And I honestly think that there is a risk involved for players personally, because, you know, there's always the possibility that somebody's going to misunderstand something, or that they're just going to sort of try to create intrigue. But there's so much to be won from that, Joe. You know, the idea of us having to go around, you know, trying to imagine what players are thinking when they can actually just tell them, us themselves, you know. But I think also it craves a certain amount of maturity on the part of you and me and everybody else who covers football, not to be plastering stuff that should be on the back pages all over the front pages, and vice versa. I think we need to have, you know, and it should be possible, we need to be able to have adult relationships with these people and cover them fairly and in a forthright manner, and, you know, be upfront with one another, and then they can do the same with us. So I think in an Irish or a Premier League context, it's going to take a long time to get there. But certainly England have opened up in recent years too. Now, they're nowhere near as open as what the Danes are, but they've certainly tried since the World Cup in 2018, and I'd hope to see it with the Irish setup as well, which I've experienced as being very, very closed over the years.
Yeah. So post Finland, and since 2016, only Belgium several times, and Finland have beaten Denmark, which tells you all you need to know about the Christian Eriksen situation and the effect it had on the team. Since then, what have you made of the Danes?
It was a fascinating situation. Again, talking to Åge Hareide, who, you know, 34 games unbeaten, and it came to last summer and his contract was up, and the DBU basically said the Danish Football Association went off your pop and Kasper Hjulmand took over, you know. So he's still a little bit disappointed. He'd love to be on the bench at Wembley tomorrow night. But this is the kind of team that they are, and this is the, you know, the annoying thing in a lot of the coverage is everybody's talking about, you know, will they pose a challenge to England as England make the final of Euro 2020? There's a lot of people sleeping on this Danish team technically and tactically, and that's why I'm delighted that, you know, you and I can have this conversation, because I think people will enjoy the game a whole lot more now, having seen them just a little bit. Against Belgium, Joe, when they came back out, I was out in the team hotel on the Monday after speaking to you, the day after I went back out, and I saw Martin Braithwaite. They have this lovely little idyllic setup. There's basically a pitch up the road, and it could be any football pitch. There's a beautiful grass football pitch, could be any club or school pitch, and then there's a little hall across the way that they use for their media business out in Helsingør there, and Martin was still crushed. Now, Kasper Schmeichel was, you know, making his way back. He'd met Christian Eriksen, he'd been to the hospital at that stage, so his recovery from that trauma had begun. Braithwaite was still crushed. Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, again, one of the toughest men I've ever met, he was still crushed. There were still tears in his eyes talking about that incident. And a couple of days later, they were playing against Belgium on the Thursday night. Now, they scored the first goal, went a goal up within 2 minutes, and they just didn't have the emotional energy to close out that game. You have a world-class player in Kevin De Bruyne coming in. I think it was Yannick Vestergaard and Simon Kjær both slipped in the run-up to the first goal. The second goal was just a world-class strike from De Bruyne. So, you know, but then against Russia, they, you know, I don't know what it was. Time seemed to heal the worst of the wounds from the trauma of Christian Eriksen's collapse. And my God, what a game they played. And there was 25,000 people in the Parken Stadium. Now, it usually hosts 38,000. I've been there when they qualified for World Cups. And the roar of those 25,000 people, when they came out to warm up, was the loudest thing I've ever heard in that stadium. It was just incredible. And then when they scored the first goal and the second goal, they went 2-0 up, and then Russia pulled one back through a penalty, and there was a murmur there a little while ago, oh no, you know, we've come so close, because they need to win with 2 clear goals to make third place and have a chance of going through as one of the best third place teams. And then Andreas Christensen, who plays for Chelsea, came with an absolute sledgehammer. Not the kind of guy who scores a whole lot of goals, but he snapped up a ball outside the box and just thundered it into the back of the net. 2 goalkeepers wouldn't have stopped it. And again, this eruption of catharsis and joy. And then there was a 4th goal scored. I think it was Joachim Mele, the wing back. He sort of, you know, scored one on the break. I think the Russians at the corner. He scored one on the break. And again, that catharsis. They sort of knew then that they were going to make it through. And this is just an incredible turnaround in the space of, you know, what was it? It was only a matter of days, really. It was maybe 8 days, 9 days that all this took place. And they went from being completely out of the picture, their Euros over and their playmaker possibly never going to play for them again, to making it through miraculously. And then after that, they've actually shown us what I wanted to see from Denmark. I don't want to be sitting here talking about Christian Eriksen and ICD devices and heart attacks and the effect of that. I want to talk about the brilliant football that they played and the way they used their wing backs and the midfield of Delaney and Højbjerg and the 3 at the back with Vestergaard and with Simon Kjær in there. You know, it's an amazing team, and now finally we're getting to talk about those things.
And have they always gone 3 at the back, or is that a recent development?
No, I think actually in the first game against Finland, they may have started with 4 at the back, but, you know, it comes very, very naturally to them. So Danish football is sort of steeped in this Dutch tradition of total football. They looked at the Dutch, in particular people like Morten Olsen, who was manager for 100 years of the Danish national team. He played for Ajax. Ajax is a finishing school for Danish footballers. Christian Eriksen himself has been there. Kasper Dolberg has been there. The Laudrups were there. You know, so this is one of those places that it just appeals to them. So they've always mimicked or had, you know, that either 3-4-3 or 4-3-3 is something that has always been very, very close to their hearts. Now, Kasper will shift. So, you know, sometimes it might look like they'll play 5 at the back against England, you know, because they play with these 2 attacking wing backs. It'll be Joachim Mele on the left side and either Daniel Vass or Jens Striger Larsen on the right. They're a little bit sort of 50-50. Those 2 guys are pretty much as good as one another. But what Kasper Hjulmand was saying today in the press conference from London was that we're not going in here as underdogs or with an underdog mentality. We're going to go in and we're going to attack, because they tried that pragmatic thing under Åge Hareide. It was terrible games against Ireland where 2 sides didn't want to attack at all. Åge is very, very pragmatic, very Norwegian, sort of 4-4-2. You know, let's play the ball long, let's keep it out of our half. And of course, Martin O'Neill and maybe Trapattoni before him were the same way for Ireland. But when they brought back Hjulmand, they brought back the romance of Danish football. This thing of get it on the floor. It doesn't matter if you make a mistake. This is the thing with 3 centre-backs as good as the 3 centre-backs that they have in Christensen, Vestergaard and Kjær, that if you make a mistake, one of those guys is going to cover up. And that's why the first goal against Belgium was so strange, because both Vestergaard and Kjær missed out. They both slipped up in trying to stop that one. So, but they are sort of, you know, they're reasonably powerful in defence there. They have these attacking wing backs, and that's where Hareide reckons that the game against England is going to be won and lost between the Danish wing backs and the English wing backs, because they're pretty going to mirror each other in terms of the tactics that they use and the formations that they use tomorrow at Wembley.
It's all very interesting. So in a sense, this Danish team have made a return maybe to the ethos of the 1980s golden generation. I mean, the 92 team are obviously famous for obvious reasons, but their coach was a more pragmatic type, whereas the 80s generation, the Laudrups in particular to the fore, get the ball down and play was the way they like to approach things. So it sounds like the 2020 version, 2021, but the 2020 version is harking back to that 80s tradition.
Very much so. And the interesting thing about that, or the person who encapsulates that for me, is Mikkel Damsgaard. So when Christian Eriksen collapsed, they brought in, was it Mathias Jensen, I think, who took Eriksen's place when they restarted the game. You know, so that substitution was made. And Jensen kind of disappeared under the waves. Mentally or emotionally, he wasn't really able for it. So he was dropped to the bench for the next game, and they brought in Mikkel Damsgaard, who plays on the wing for Sampdoria. Now, Mikkel is 20 years of age, and there is not an ounce of fear in the boy. He just doesn't care, right? If he tries dribbling somebody, they take the ball off him. He doesn't care. He'll try and go, if he went left the first time, he'll go right the second time. He got booked, I think, in the game against Belgium for an absolutely hysterically bad dive. Didn't care. Even the crowd, the 25,000 people in Packham were laughing at him. Didn't care. Then in the next game against Russia, he came out and he scored an absolutely world-class goal to steady the Danes' nerves and to open the scoring against the Russians, which is absolutely crucial. And he'll do the same thing again tomorrow night. It won't bother him one iota that the 60,000 people there, 52,000 of them are going to be English men and English women cheering on their team. He's just going to go out there and play his game as if he's playing, on the playground at home. And that really is a throwback to the 1980s when they looked at this Dutch philosophy. And back in the early 80s, of course, Morten Olsen himself was still playing, and he was going, we're as good as this. Is not difficult. If you get the ball and knock it around, if you play these triangles the whole time, it's actually impossible for the other team to get the ball off you. Let's try that. And they had the physicality to match that. And once they developed that, the tactical idea of it, and they are technically very, very good players. You very seldom see them take a bad touch. With very few exceptions. Andreas Cornelius, perhaps, striker who come off the bench, he's a bit more, the standard English number 9 centre forward. But for the most part, they're well able to play with the ball at their feet. And to go back to that then means an awful lot to the Danish people. So under Hordai, the team did really well, didn't lose any games, but it didn't win any fans either. And that was the hard part for them because they're so steeped in this tradition of getting the ball down. They look at the Swedes and they laugh. And they look at the Norwegians and they laugh at the primitive football that they play. So they want to play this romantic football. They want to win, of course. They want to get to the final, but they want to do it playing the right way.
I'm looking forward to the game more now, I must say, because I wasn't sure what approach the Danes would take. I certainly would be confident in saying that Gareth Southgate will be pragmatic to the end here. That is pretty much his approach and he's sticking to it. So it'll be interesting to watch the Danes potentially take the initiative here against England in front of 60,000 English people and to see how the mood in the stadium reacts to that, because like you say, I don't think the 60, 70,000 English fans heading to Wembley tomorrow are anticipating Denmark to dominate this game or to take the attacking initiative. They are, already counting down to the final, I think, realistically.
Well, I think in everything I've seen or consumed this week, as the modern word has it, in English media, it literally has been that. People are calling me up, and they're going, well, tell us about that so we can get that out of the way and move on to Italy or Spain in the final, and no matter how hard you try to tell them, Joe, they just won't listen, and I keep telling them that these are no pushovers. And the other thing, of course, that we forget is that Kasper Schmeichel hasn't had a Kasper Schmeichel game just yet. Those games where he comes out with the S on his chest as the absolute superhero, like he did in, I think it was the cup final there in Wembley. He hasn't had to do that just yet. And if he is ever going to do that, as a young man who spent most of his life growing up in England, dying to play for the Danish team, there was never an idea that he would have been able to play for England because of naturalisation and citizenship and these things, I'm sure. But of course, there was never a dream of that. He wanted to be like his father Peter, who won the European Championship in 1992 with Denmark. And I would fully expect him to go out there against the likes of Harry Kane tomorrow and want to show these people what they're missing. So it really is. There's so many things that the English can trip over there tomorrow. But I honestly believe that it is what you're saying, that if Gareth Southgate goes out there, armed with data and all this kind of thing, it's okay if we just do this in the first 20 minutes and this in the second 20 minutes. I honestly think that tomorrow night in knockout football, the semi-final stage of major tournaments, fortune favours the brave. Now, England have wonderful attacking players, but Denmark have wonderful defenders. And they also have this thing of the fact that they're still in this tournament at all is a miracle in its own way. So they have absolutely nothing to lose. If they get knocked out tomorrow night, nobody in Denmark is going to love them any less. But if they go to the final again, as they did in 1992, their names are going to be in the history books forever. It's going to be one of the most amazing achievements, not just in Danish football, but in any football anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's funny. We've Brian Laudrup on the show on Thursday. I'll be talking to him for about an hour. I can't wait. So I've been immersed in Euro 92 over the last couple of days, and
oh man,
it's
fantastic.
Just so phenomenally interesting, and it really makes you believe strange things can happen again. One last point or concern, Philip, then. So on the footballing side of things, I've far fewer worries about Denmark now. The emotional toll of the Eriksen situation, and then just the toll, full stop, of going through a tournament and playing all these games. You looked at England against the Ukraine, and on the hour mark, Rice and Phillips had been substituted. Sterling was taken off. They all had their feet up from pretty early on in this game. So you would think they're pretty fresh. And Southgate, in fairness to him, has rotated brilliantly across the tournament. Only Pickford has played every minute. How are the Danes, by comparison, do you suspect, on an energy front?
this is the one thing that would worry me, Joe, is the energy levels, right? So you're talking about Thomas Delaney, who has been, a fixture in the Danish team for many years, real high energy player, and he's a defensive midfielder who sits slightly to the left, and Pierre-Emile Højbjerg sits to the right. Now, I can't ever remember him being substituted with any regularity before, but now that's starting to happen. In the 65th, the 70th, the 75th minute, he's starting to go to the bench, and that's not good. Simon Kjær, of course, he came out of the game against Finland. Mostly he wasn't fit to continue, and he considered not playing the game against Belgium. Daniel Vass has been switched out now, and Jens Stiger Larsen has come in. I don't know if that's to do with energy or if it's just how he's performing in training. I haven't been able to find that out. That is the one thing that would worry me. In terms of attacking players, the Danes have a whole heap of players that we haven't even seen yet. You have Robert Skov, who has a tremendous left foot. He's one of these left-footed wingers that likes to play on the right. Tremendous at dead balls, and if we're taking penalties, you're going to want that fella in the team as well, because he'll put the ball out the back wall of Wembley if he has a chance. So there is a little bit, but in that key position of the central midfield, I would worry about the energy. They played in immense heat in Baku the other night against, it was a tough game against the Czechs. It was an ugly game. It was a game they really had to work hard just to hold on to the 2-1 win. But that said, what's usually said these days in football is it takes 72 hours to get over it. But the energy that the Danes play with as well, because they press very hard. And this is something that maybe England haven't seen just yet. Not even Germany managed to press. They didn't do this gegenpressing thing that they normally do. So, I really think that, this is just who Hjulmand is. This is just who the Danes are. They're going to throw the kitchen sink at them for the 90 minutes, and if legs run out, okay, next man up, let's go. If it has to be, Skov Olsen or Skov or whoever's coming off the bench, let's just bring them in there. Cornelius, Jonas Wind has barely figured this at all. The striker's a really good player, throw them all on there. But I do think that we're only talking about 2 more games. We're possibly only talking about 1 more game. And I reckon that's going to be the message to them in the dressing room tomorrow night. It's going to be, look, lads, forget about the final on Sunday, right? This is Wednesday. There's nothing after this. This is it. So you go out there and you leave everything out there and you put everything you have into beating England, because if you don't do that, there is no tomorrow. And I can imagine with the kind of men that are in that team, that's what they're going to do. And to be honest, I just can't wait for kickoff tomorrow night.
Philip O'Connor, great stuff. Thanks, Philip.
Thank you, Joe.
There you are. That was Philip O'Connor speaking to us yesterday. Morata. For all debuts, he has come off the bench and he has equalised with a brilliant goal, it must be said, Alvaro Morata for Spain. 1-2 on the edge of the area and finished beautifully, and ran to the camera and shouted down the camera to all the people on Twitter who've been saying dreadful things about him and his family over the last couple of weeks. So wonderful moment for him. And the net result is full-time, 1-1, extra time about to ensue at Wembley.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power's Save Our Game. Donating at least 100,000 to Irish football via England goals this summer. Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Coming soon, a sci-fi sequel that's driving critics wild.
I'm back, Mary. It's time to celebrate.
Time is the one thing we can't afford, John.
You're wrong, Mary.